What if humanity's greatest guardian wasn't on Earth, but watching silently from above? What if our moon, that familiar silver companion we've gazed at for millennia, was never just a celestial body, but something far more terrifying and magnificent? With 50,000 years, it has waited. For 50,000 years, it has watched. And now, as alien claws tear through lunar rock and ancient seals crack under the weight of forgotten oaths, humanity is about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy is the one that's been protecting you all along. The universe thought it had buried this nightmare. The universe was wrong. Welcome to the day Earth's moon revealed its true nature, not as our planet's gentle guardian, but as the tomb of the most feared war machine ever created. And it's about to wake up. Commander Sarah Chen pressed her face against the observation window of Luna Station Alpha, watching the impossible sight unfold before her eyes. The moon's surface, which had remained unchanged for billions of years, was moving. Not the subtle shifting of lunar dust or the occasional meteorite impact that every astronaut learned to recognize, but deliberate, purposeful movement that defied every law of celestial mechanics she knew. "Control, are you seeing this?" she whispered into her comm unit, her breath fogging the reinforced glass. The response crackled back immediately, tension evident even through the static. "We see it, Commander. All monitoring stations are reporting the same phenomenon. We're trying to get readings, but our instruments are going crazy." Sarah had been stationed on Luna Alpha for 18 months, long enough to know the moon's every crater and ridge like the back of her hand. But now, those familiar landmarks were changing. Massive sections of the lunar surface were rising like enormous metallic flowers blooming in slow motion. What she had always assumed was solid rock was revealing itself to be something else entirely, something that gleamed with an otherworldly silver sheen under the harsh sunlight. The first sign had come 3 hours earlier, during what should have been a routine morning observation shift. Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief geologist, had noticed unusual seismic readings emanating from deep within the moon's core. The readings were unlike anything in their databases. Rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, but far too massive and far too deliberate to be natural. "Sarah, you need to see this," Webb called from across the observation deck, his voice tight with disbelief. She reluctantly tore her gaze away from the transforming landscape and joined him at the main console. The seismic display showed wave patterns that seemed to pulse with organic regularity. "What am I looking at, Marcus?" "Something that shouldn't exist," he replied, adjusting the frequency filters. "These readings suggest massive hollow spaces inside the moon, connected by what appears to be a network of corridors or passages. But here's the thing. The moon's density has always been accounted for in our calculations. If these spaces existed, we should have detected them decades ago." Before Sarah could respond, a new voice cut through their conversation. "That's because they weren't there decades ago." The speaker was Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's xenoarchaeologist and the only person aboard who specialized in ancient alien artifacts. She approached their workstation with a tablet in hand, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of the displays. "What do you mean they weren't there?" Sarah asked. Elena held up her tablet, showing a series of detailed scans and calculations. "I've been running comparative analysis on our current readings against historical lunar surveys going back to the Apollo missions. The density variations we're seeing now simply didn't exist in previous measurements. It's as if something inside the moon has been activating." The three scientists stood in silence, absorbing the implications. Finally, Sarah activated the station-wide communication system. "All personnel, this is Commander Chen. Please report to the main observation deck immediately. We have a situation that requires everyone's attention." Within minutes, the 18-person crew of Luna Alpha had assembled. The observation deck, usually spacious enough for comfortable movement, felt cramped as scientists, engineers, and support staff crowded around the windows and monitoring stations. Sarah looked at their faces, a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and growing concern. "As you've probably noticed, we're witnessing something unprecedented," she began. The Moon's surface is undergoing massive structural changes, and our preliminary analysis suggests these changes are originating from within the lunar interior. Vasquez has some theories about what we might be dealing with. Elena stepped forward, her scientific composure barely containing her excitement. Based on the patterns we're observing and the comparative analysis of historical data, I believe we're witnessing the activation of some kind of ancient artificial structure. The regularity of the seismic patterns, the coordinated nature of the surface changes, and the sudden appearance of hollow spaces all point to technology rather than natural phenomena. Are you suggesting the Moon is artificial? Not entirely, Elena replied, but I think significant portions of it might be. Or rather, I think something artificial has been embedded within the natural lunar structure for an extremely long time. As if responding to their conversation, the Moon's surface suddenly erupted in a brilliant display of lights. Geometric patterns blazed across the lunar landscape, forming intricate designs that stretched from horizon to horizon. The patterns pulsed with energy, creating a rhythm that seemed almost musical in its complexity. "Jesus Christ," whispered Dr. Patricia Morrison, the station's communications specialist. Are those symbols? Sarah activated the recording systems and directed the station's most powerful telescopes toward the illuminated surface. The symbols were indeed recognizable as some form of writing or notation, though unlike any human language. They seemed to be three-dimensional, projecting upward from the lunar surface like holographic displays. "Control, are you getting this?" Sarah called to Earth. The response came back after the usual transmission delay, but the voice was different, more authoritative, with an undercurrent of barely controlled panic. "Luna Alpha, this is General Morrison at Space Command. We're tracking your situation from multiple ground stations. I need you to maintain detailed records of everything you're observing. We're scrambling analysis teams and preparing emergency protocols." "Emergency protocols for what, sir?" Sarah asked. "We don't know yet, Commander, but we're detecting similar energy signatures at locations around Earth. Ancient archaeological sites are showing unprecedented electromagnetic activity. Stone circles in Britain, the pyramids in Egypt, temples in Cambodia, they're all resonating with the same frequency patterns you're recording from the Moon." If ancient structures on Earth were responding to whatever was happening on the Moon, it suggested a connection that spanned millennia. She looked around at her crew, seeing her own realization reflected in their faces. "Elena," she said quietly, "how long would something have to be embedded in the Moon for it to influence ancient human civilizations?" Before Elena could answer, a new development captured their attention. The lunar surface began to split along carefully defined geometric lines, revealing massive structures beneath. What emerged defied human understanding, colossal forms that combined organic curves with crystalline precision, all glowing with the same ethereal light as the symbols. "Oh my God," breathed Morrison. "It's a ship." "The whole thing is a ship," but even as she said it, Sarah knew that wasn't quite right. It was more than a ship. It was a construct so vast and complex that it challenged their conception of what technology could be. The structures rising from the lunar surface were clearly artificial, but they seemed to have been grown rather than built, as if some incredible intelligence had found a way to merge engineering with evolution. The largest structure, emerging from what had once been the Sea of Tranquility, towered above the lunar horizon like a mountain-sized cathedral. Its surface was covered in the same shifting symbols they had observed earlier, but now the patterns were moving, rearranging themselves in sequences that suggested active communication or computation. "Control," Sarah reported, her voice steadier than she felt. "We're observing the emergence of massive artificial structures from the lunar interior. The largest appears to be approximately 50 kilometers in height and shows clear signs of active systems. We're detecting electromagnetic emissions across the entire spectrum." The response from Earth came back with unusual speed. "Commander Chen, this is Dr. Rachel Harrison from the Xenological Research Division. I'm being patched through on an emergency basis. We've just completed preliminary analysis of the symbols you're transmitting. They match inscriptions we've found at archaeological sites around the world. Inscriptions that predate known human civilization by tens of thousands of years. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Dr. Harrison, what are you saying? I'm saying that whatever is inside the moon has been in contact with Earth for a very long time. And based on the activation pattern we're seeing, something has triggered it to wake up. As if summoned by her words, space around the moon suddenly filled with new arrivals. Ships materialized seemingly from nowhere, sleek, predatory forms that bore no resemblance to any human technology. They arranged themselves in a complex three-dimensional formation around the moon, their dark hulls reflecting no light. "Contacts!" shouted Park from the sensor station. "Multiple bogies appearing around lunar orbit." They're not broadcasting any identification signals, and their configuration doesn't match anything in our databases. Sarah grabbed the communication controls. "Unknown vessels, this is Commander Sarah Chen of Luna Station Alpha. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The response came not through their communication systems, but as a direct projection into the observation deck. A figure materialized before them, humanoid in basic shape but clearly not human. Its skin had a translucent quality that revealed internal structures moving like liquid light, and its eyes held an intelligence that seemed ancient beyond measure. When it spoke, its words bypassed their ears entirely. "Humans of the third planet. You have done well to survive this long, but your guardianship period is ending. The Sentinel has been awakened by forces that seek to claim this system. You must prepare for what comes next." "What are you?" Sarah managed to ask, though her voice came out as barely a whisper. "We are the architects. Long ago, we placed the Sentinel here to watch over your world while your species developed. Now the ancient enemies have found you, and the time for passive protection is over." The image gestured toward the massive structures emerging from the lunar surface. "The Sentinel was built by your predecessors, the first intelligent species to evolve in this system before your star consumed their worlds. They knew that others would come. Others who consume young civilizations like fire consumes paper. So they built the ultimate guardian and hid it where it would be safe until it was needed." Sarah's mind reeled with the implications. "You're saying humans aren't the first intelligent species to evolve in our solar system? You are the third. The first fell to the Devourers 50,000 years ago. The second gave their lives to build the Sentinel and ensure that their sacrifice would not be meaningless. Now you, the third children of Saul, face the same threat. Around them, the alien ships began to move in formation, their dark hulls suddenly blazing with weapon systems that made human technology look like stone tools. But they weren't targeting Luna Alpha or Earth. Instead, they were positioning themselves between the solar system and the deep space beyond. "The Devourers come in number beyond counting," the architect continued. "They have consumed galaxies, turning entire star systems into feeding grounds for their endless hunger. But here, they will find something they do not expect. They will find that this system is protected by the greatest weapon ever constructed, a weapon built from love, sacrifice, and the determination that some things are worth dying to preserve." The lunar surface completed its transformation, revealing the Sentinel in its full glory. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, a fusion of technology and artistry that spoke of a civilization that had reached heights humanity couldn't yet imagine. Its weapon systems, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities, began to power up with a deep thrumming that they could feel in their bones even through the vacuum of space. "What do you need us to do?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Learn. Adapt. With Trust Teddy. Survive. The Sentinel will protect you as long as it can, but the ultimate victory must come from within. Your species has qualities that even the builders did not possess, a flexibility of thought, a talent for innovation under pressure, and most importantly, a refusal to surrender hope even in the darkest circumstances. We go now to gather others who will stand with us. The battle for Sol begins soon, but it will not end quickly. Teach your people what they need to know. The galaxy depends on it. As the projection disappeared, Sarah looked around at her crew. Their faces reflected the same mixture of terror and determination that she felt building within herself. They had just learned that everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe was wrong, and that they were about to become participants in a war that had been raging across the galaxy for millennia. "Control," she said into her communicator, her voice carrying a new authority born from necessity. "I need a direct line to the highest levels of government. All governments. What I'm about to tell them will change everything." Outside their windows, the Sentinel continued to rise from its ancient slumber, each new system that came online adding to the symphony of power that filled the space around Earth's moon. In the distance, more ships appeared, some clearly allied with the architects, others bearing configurations that spoke of different origins and purposes. The universe had come to Sol, and humanity was about to discover whether they were ready for the truth about their cosmic inheritance. 3 days after the initial awakening of the Sentinel, the world below had transformed into something unrecognizable. Sarah Chen stood in the same observation deck, but everything else had changed. The moon now dominated the sky with structures that defied human engineering, their surfaces alive with patterns of light that pulsed like neural networks processing impossible amounts of information. Earth itself was responding. Ancient sites across the planet had awakened in sympathy with their lunar guardian, creating a network of energy that connected every continent. The Great Pyramid at Giza blazed with the same ethereal light as the Sentinel's symbols, while Stonehenge had become a pillar of pure energy reaching toward the stars. Similar activations were reported from Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat, Easter Island, and hundreds of lesser-known archaeological sites. Dr. Elena Vasquez hadn't left the analysis station in 2 days, surviving on stimulants and determination as she worked to decode the flood of information pouring in from both lunar and terrestrial sources. Her eyes were bloodshot from staring at displays, but her excitement was infectious. "Sarah, you need to see this," she called out, her voice hoarse but triumphant. "I've been analyzing the harmonic patterns from all the activated sites, and they're not random. They're forming a coherent information matrix, like a massive database that's been distributed across the planet for thousands of years. Trust Teddy." Sarah joined Elena at her workstation, noting the complex three-dimensional models rotating on the screens. "What kind of information?" "Everything," Elena replied, her hands dancing across the controls to highlight different data streams. "Star charts, technological specifications, historical records, genetic databases. It's like the previous civilizations left us an entire library encoded in stone and metal, just waiting for the right activation signal." Not only had humanity inherited a guardian moon, but they had also been living on top of a vast repository of knowledge left by their predecessors. Sarah was about to respond when the communication system crackled to life with an urgent transmission from Earth. "Luna Alpha, this is Director Sarah Mitchell from the newly formed Xenological Crisis Response Team. We need you to facilitate immediate data transfer for all your accumulated observations. We've got incoming signals from the edge of the solar system, and we need every piece of information you've gathered to prepare our response." "Understood, Director. Transmitting all data now," Sarah replied, initiating the upload sequence. "What's the situation planet-side?" "Controlled chaos would be the diplomatic term," Mitchell responded with dry humor. "Every major government is scrambling to understand what we're dealing with, while their populations are watching ancient monuments light up like Christmas trees. We've established joint research teams at every activated site, but we're barely scratching the surface of what we're discovering." Through the static, Sarah could hear the background noise of a command center in crisis mode, multiple conversations, urgent commands, and the constant hum of emergency coordination. "Director, what about the incoming signals you mentioned?" We're detecting massive electromagnetic disturbances at the edge of our solar system, consistent with ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. The energy signatures don't match the Architect vessels we've cataloged, and the Sentinel is responding to them with increasing agitation. As if summoned by Mitchell's words, the lunar surface erupted with new activity. Weapon systems that had been dormant since the initial awakening suddenly blazed to life, their targeting arrays swiveling to focus on something beyond human perception. The Sentinel's communication towers began broadcasting on frequencies that made their instruments scream with feedback. "Elena, are you getting any of this translation?" Sarah asked. Elena's fingers flew across her keyboard as she attempted to filter the overwhelming data stream. Some of it. The Sentinel is angry. No, that's not right. It's determined. It's broadcasting what appears to be a challenge or warning to something approaching from the outer system. Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his seismic monitoring station with a pale face. The moon's interior structure is changing again. Massive systems are coming online, things that must have been dormant for millennia. The energy output is increasing exponentially. Sarah activated the station's external cameras and directed them toward deep space. At maximum magnification, she could just make out tiny points of light that seemed to be moving against the star field. As she watched, more points appeared, until the edge of the solar system began to look like a distant city turning on its lights at nightfall. Control. We have visual confirmation of multiple objects at the system's edge. Estimated count is already over 1,000 and climbing. The response from Director Mitchell came back with barely controlled tension. Confirmed, Luna Alpha. Our deep space monitoring stations are tracking what appears to be a massive fleet approaching at significant fraction of light speed. Estimated arrival at Earth orbit is approximately 72 hours. Elena suddenly straightened at her workstation, her face reflecting both excitement and fear. I'm getting something from the Architect communication network. They're broadcasting to all active human sites simultaneously. The familiar figure of the Architect materialized in their observation deck once again, but this time its translucent form seemed more solid, more urgent. When it spoke, its mental voice carried undertones of ancient sadness mixed with fierce determination. Children of the third evolution, the Devourers have arrived in force greater than we anticipated. They bring with them technologies that have consumed star systems across the galaxy. But do not despair. You have advantages they do not expect. The Architect gestured, and the space around them filled with holographic displays showing the approaching fleet in terrifying detail. The ships were massive, organic-looking constructs that seemed to ride through space like enormous parasites. Their hulls gleamed with a dark iridescence that suggested biological components merged with advanced technology. These are the Devourer's harvest ships, the Architect continued. Each one carries the capacity to drain a world of all life and process it into energy for their endless expansion. They have perfected this process over millions of years, consuming countless civilizations. Sarah found her voice despite the overwhelming display. How many civilizations? Entire galactic clusters have fallen to their hunger. They consume not just biological life, but the very essence of what makes species unique, their knowledge, their creativity, their potential for growth. They leave behind empty worlds orbiting cold stars. The holographic display shifted to show the Devourer fleet in more detail. Sarah could see that their ships were arranged in complex patterns around massive central vessels that dwarfed anything human engineering had ever attempted. The largest of these central ships appeared to be the size of small moons. But here, the Architect said, its mental voice carrying a note of hope, they face something they have never encountered before. The Sentinel was not merely built as a weapon. It was built as the ultimate expression of sacrifice and love. The civilization that created it gave everything they had, including their lives, to ensure that future children of Sol would have a chance to survive and grow. What makes the Sentinel different from other defensive systems they must have encountered? The builders discovered something the devourers cannot understand, that the strength of a civilization lies not in its technology alone, but in its willingness to sacrifice for others. The Sentinel is powered not by conventional energy sources, but by the accumulated hopes and dreams of every species that has ever looked up at the stars from your worlds and wished for a better future. The explanation seemed too fantastic to believe, but as Sarah looked out at the lunar surface, she could see the truth of it in the way the Sentinel systems pulsed with something that felt almost alive. The weapon systems weren't just machines. They were monuments to the civilizations that had built them, each component carrying the essence of beings who had chosen to die so that others might live. "What do you need us to do?" Sarah asked. Learn quickly. The Sentinel can protect your system, but the ultimate victory will require something only your species possesses, the ability to adapt and innovate under impossible pressure. Your predecessors were brilliant engineers and philosophers, but they thought in patterns. You think in chaos, and chaos is the one thing the devourers cannot predict or counter. The architect's image began to shimmer as if the projection was becoming unstable. "We must leave you now. Our own fleets move to engage the devourers at the system's edge, but the main battle will be fought here, around your worlds. Remember, the Sentinel responds to intent as much as command. If you can understand what the builders intended, you may find capabilities within it that even we do not know about." As the projection faded, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. She looked around at her small crew, realizing that they had somehow become humanity's primary liaison with technologies beyond their understanding. "Elena, I need you to focus everything on decoding the Sentinel's interface systems. If it responds to intent, we need to figure out how to communicate with it effectively." "Already on it," Elena replied, her attention fixed on streams of data flowing across her screens. "The linguistic patterns are starting to make sense. It's not just symbolic, it's empathic. The builders created a communication system based on emotional resonance rather than just logical syntax." Webb called out from his station. "I'm detecting massive energy buildups in the Sentinel's core systems. Whatever it's preparing for, it's drawing power from sources we can't even identify." Sarah moved to the primary communication console and opened channels to both Earth and the Architect fleet. "Control, this is Luna Alpha. We're going to attempt direct interface with the Sentinel systems. If we lose communication, assume the worst and implement whatever contingency plans you have ready." Director Mitchell's voice came back immediately. "Commander, are you sure about this? We don't know what attempting direct contact might do to you or your crew." "We don't have a choice," Sarah replied, looking out at the approaching fleet that now filled the edge of their visual displays. "The architects made it clear. This battle is going to be won or lost based on our ability to work with the Sentinel. We can't do that from a distance." Elena looked up from her workstation with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "I think I found the primary interface. It's not a physical connection. It's more like a mental bridge, but the translation protocols suggest it requires multiple human minds working in concert to establish stable communication." "How many?" Sarah asked. "Based on the harmonic patterns I'm seeing, I'd estimate we need at least 3 people, possibly more. And they have to be individuals who can maintain emotional stability while processing information at levels far beyond normal human capacity." Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in their faces that she felt building within herself. These were the people who had volunteered for the most isolated assignment in human space, who had left behind everything familiar to spend months staring at the moon and recording data that they knew might never be used. They were explorers, scientists, and dreamers, exactly the kind of people who would volunteer to risk their minds interfacing with alien technology. "I'm in," Elena said without hesitation. "Count me in too," added Webb, leaving his seismic monitoring station to join them. "Doctor!" Morrison, the communications specialist, nodded her agreement. "If we're going to talk to that thing, you'll need someone who understands signal processing and protocol translation." Within minutes, they had assembled a team of 6 volunteers, each bringing critical expertise to the attempt. Sarah felt a moment of pride in her crew. Faced with the unknown and potentially deadly, they had chosen to step forward rather than back. "All right, people," she said, settling into the interface chair that Elena had identified as the primary connection point. "According to the builder's documentation, this should feel like the most intense meditation session of your lives. Stay focused on your intent to communicate and protect, and trust the technology to handle the rest." As they initiated the connection sequence, the lunar surface around them began to respond. The Sentinel's towers pulsed with increasing brightness, and Sarah could feel something vast and ancient touching the edges of her consciousness. It was like standing at the shore of an ocean that was made of pure thought and emotion, knowing that she was about to dive into depths that no human mind had ever experienced. The last thing she saw before the interface fully engaged was the Devourer fleet reaching the orbit of Neptune, their dark ships already beginning to spread throughout the outer system, like an infection seeking something to consume. The moment Sarah's consciousness touched the Sentinel's interface, reality exploded into dimensions she hadn't known existed. Her awareness expanded beyond the confines of her physical body, spreading through networks of crystalline thought that connected every part of the massive construct. She could feel Elena, Webb, Morrison, and the others beside her in this strange new space, their minds like bright stars in an ocean of ancient memory. But she was not alone with just her crew. The interface carried the echoes of everyone who had ever contributed to the Sentinel's creation. Thousands of beings from the civilization that had built it, their final thoughts and hopes preserved in the quantum substrata of the great weapon. Their voices whispered through the network like a chorus of ghosts, offering guidance and sharing their accumulated wisdom. "Welcome, child of the Third Awakening," came a voice that felt both individual and collective. "We are the Builders, and we have been waiting for you to find us." Sarah tried to respond, but found that communication in this realm worked differently than speech. Instead of words, she projected her questions as pure concepts and emotions. Why us? Why now? The response came as a flood of images and sensations. She saw the Builders as they had been. Tall, graceful beings with skin that changed color based on their emotions, who had evolved on worlds that Sol had long since consumed during its expansion into a red giant. She felt their terror as the Devourers first appeared at the edges of their system, and their desperate determination as they realized that their own civilization was doomed, but that others might yet be saved. "We built the Sentinel not as a weapon of war, but as a beacon of hope," the collective voice continued. "Every system within it carries the essence of our greatest achievements, not in technology, but in understanding what it means to choose sacrifice over survival." Elena's consciousness flickered beside Sarah's, bright with scientific curiosity. "How does it work?" "The energy sources we're detecting don't match anything in human physics." The Builder's response came with patient amusement. "Your physics assume that consciousness is separate from reality. We learn differently. The Sentinel draws its power from the quantum foam itself, guided by the intentions and will of those who operate it. The stronger the determination to protect, the greater its capabilities become." Sarah felt understanding dawning. That's why you needed human operators. Our species' emotional range and adaptability. Your predecessors, the second children of Sol, were brilliant logicians and engineers. But they thought in rigid patterns, seeking perfect solutions to complex problems. The Devourers learned to counter such thinking. You, however, think in beautiful chaos. You find solutions that should not work, yet do. You adapt in ways that cannot be predicted or countered. Through the interface, Sarah became aware of the larger battle unfolding around them. The Architect fleets had engaged the Adower advance forces near Jupiter, and the space around the gas giant blazed with energies that would have been visible from Earth if anyone had time to look up. But the main Devourer force was still approaching, and their numbers were beyond anything the Architects could handle alone. "Show me the weapon systems," Sarah projected, feeling her crew's consciousness merge with her own as they shared the same intent. Reality shifted, and suddenly they were experiencing the Sentinel from the perspective of its central intelligence. Every weapon emplacement, every shield generator, every sensor array became as familiar as their own fingers. But more than that, they could feel the weapon's emotional resonance, its deep longing to fulfill the purpose for which it had been created. The Sentinel was lonely. It had waited for 50,000 years, watching over Earth's developing civilizations, wanting nothing more than to justify the sacrifice of those who had built it. Every major extinction event on Earth had tested its resolve. Should it intervene to save developing life or maintain its hidden vigil for the greater threat it knew would eventually come? You could have helped us. Webb's consciousness projected with a mixture of wonder and sadness. During the meteor impacts, the ice ages, the volcanic catastrophes. And in doing so, we might have revealed ourselves to the Devourers before you were ready, came the reply. Every civilization they consume makes them stronger, more adaptable. If they had found Earth while your species was still primitive, both you and the Sentinel would have been lost. The wait was necessary, painful though it was. The builders had programmed the Sentinel with the capacity for patience beyond human understanding, teaching it to value the future over the present, to accept the deaths of millions in order to preserve the possibility of billions. It was a burden that would have broken human minds, but the Sentinel had carried it faithfully across the millennia. Morrison's consciousness sparkled with sudden comprehension. The ancient structures on Earth, they weren't just power sources. They were communication nodes, weren't they? Ways for you to stay connected to human development without revealing yourselves. Through them we learned your languages, your ways of thinking, your dreams and fears. We have watched every major step in your evolution, celebrating your victories and mourning your failures. In many ways, we know your species better than you know yourselves. The intimate knowledge was both comforting and unsettling. Sarah realized that humanity had never truly been alone. They had been watched over by an intelligence that understood them on levels they were only beginning to comprehend themselves. Elena's scientific mind was racing through the implications. The quantum entanglement systems, the probability matrices, the consciousness-driven power sources. You're describing technology that operates on principles we haven't even theorized yet. You seek to understand the universe as if you were separate from it, when in truth, consciousness and reality are aspects of the same phenomenon. The Devourers never learned this. They consume but do not create, take but do not give. That is why they can be defeated. Sarah felt the weight of approaching crisis pressing against her awareness. Through the Sentinel sensor, she could perceive the Devourer fleet spreading throughout the outer system like a plague, their ships beginning the process of converting asteroid material into more vessels. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach Earth within 48 hours. "What do we do?" she projected, feeling her crew's combined determination flowing through the interface. "First, you must understand what you are truly fighting," came the reply. The Devourers are not merely an aggressive species, they are victims of their own success. Millions of years ago, they solved the problem of mortality by merging their consciousness with technology. But in doing so, they lost the ability to create, to grow, to become more than they were. Now they can only exist by consuming the creativity and potential of others. Images flooded through the interface, scenes of entire star systems being systematically harvested, their worlds stripped of every form of life before being converted into raw energy. But more disturbing were the glimpses of what the Devourers had become, beings so merged with their technology that they no longer possessed individual identity, existing only as parts of a vast collective hunger. They are what we might become if we chose survival over purpose, Sarah realized. With trust, Teddy. Exactly. This is why the Sentinel exists, not just to destroy them, but to demonstrate that there is another way. Watch. The lunar surface around them began to change as the Sentinel's true capabilities revealed themselves. Sarah had thought the weapon systems she had seen before were impressive, but now she understood they were merely the most obvious manifestations of something far more complex. The entire moon was transforming into a fusion of technology and artistry that spoke to purposes beyond mere warfare. Gardens began to bloom across the lunar landscape, not earth plants, but crystalline structures that captured and transformed energy in ways that were both functional and beautiful. The weapon emplacements revealed themselves to be as much about creation as destruction, capable of not just eliminating threats, but converting hostile energy into forms that could support life. This is what the builders truly left you, the collective voice explained. Not just a weapon, but a demonstration of what civilization can become when it chooses to give rather than take, to create rather than consume. The power source isn't just quantum foam, it's the creative potential of conscious beings. The more we invest ourselves in protecting rather than conquering, the stronger it becomes. Now you begin to understand. But knowledge alone is insufficient. The Devourers approach with numbers that dwarf anything we faced when we built the Sentinel. To defeat them, you will need to do more than operate our technology. You will need to exceed it. Sarah felt a chill of uncertainty. How can we exceed technology created by a civilization thousands of years more advanced than ours? By doing what your species does best, finding solutions that should not work. The Sentinel was designed to be operated by beings who thought in patterns. You think in beautiful chaos. Use that chaos. Trust your instincts over our programming. Make the impossible possible. Through the interface, Sarah became aware of her crew's individual contributions to their shared consciousness. Elena brought scientific curiosity and the ability to see patterns in chaos. Webb contributed deep understanding of how complex systems interact and evolve. Morrison offered expertise in communication and signal processing that allowed them to interface more effectively with the Sentinel's quantum networks. But together, they formed something greater than the sum of their parts. A hybrid intelligence that combined human intuition with alien technology in ways that even the builders had not anticipated. The Devourers have learned to counter every defensive strategy they have encountered over millions of years, Sarah projected. But they've never encountered anything like this, have they? No. And that may be your greatest advantage. But remember, they learn quickly from each encounter. Whatever strategy you develop, you will likely have only one chance to implement it successfully. Sarah felt the Sentinel's vast intelligence focusing on the approaching threat, its weapon systems cycling through targeting solutions and probability matrices at speeds beyond human comprehension. But underlying all the technical analysis was something that felt remarkably human: hope mixed with determination, the absolute refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. "We're ready," she projected, feeling her crew's unanimous agreement. "Show us what we can do." The builders' response came with a warmth that transcended their alien nature. "You already know. Trust yourselves and trust each other. The greatest weapons are not built of metal and energy, but of love and sacrifice and the courage to risk everything for something larger than yourself." As the interface connection deepened, Sarah felt her consciousness expanding to encompass not just the Sentinel, but the network of ancient sites on Earth, the approaching architect fleets, and even the edges of the Devourer formation. For the first time since the crisis began, she felt ready for what was coming. The universe was about to witness something unprecedented: humanity's first battle for the stars, fought with weapons built from sacrifice and powered by hope. The final confrontation began not with explosions or energy beams, but with silence. Sarah, maintaining her consciousness link with the Sentinel, felt the moment when the Devourer fleet completed its arrangement around Earth's orbital space. Their ships formed geometric patterns that spoke of mathematical precision refined over millions of years of conquest. Configurations designed to maximize efficiency while minimizing the possibility of escape for their prey. Through the Sentinel's quantum sensors, she could perceive the true scope of what humanity faced: Over 10,000 vessels ranging from scout ships the size of skyscrapers to massive harvester platforms that dwarfed entire cities. Each one pulsed with dark energy that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating voids in space where stars simply disappeared from view. "They are more numerous than we calculated," came the collective voice of the builders, their ancient consciousness tinged with concern. "The Devourers have learned from their previous encounters with Sentinel technology. They come prepared for total war." Elena's consciousness flickered with scientific fascination even in the face of overwhelming odds. "Their ships aren't just vessels. They're organisms, Teddy. Living technology that adapts in real time to whatever they encounter." "Yes," the builders confirmed. "This is why they have been so successful. They do not build weapons. They grow them, evolve them, perfect them through countless battles across the galaxy." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling over her like a mantle. Through the interface, she was connected not just to her crew but to every human on Earth, their hopes and fears flowing through the ancient monuments that dotted the planet's surface. 7 billion people looking up at a sky that no longer offered the comfort of familiar constellations, but instead showed them the cold reality of a universe where they were no longer alone. Director Mitchell Sarah projected through the communication network. "What's the status of Earth's defenses?" The response came back immediately, carried through quantum channels that made real-time communication possible despite the vast distances involved. "All military forces are on highest alert, but our weapons are designed for terrestrial threats. Against technology like this, we might as well be throwing rocks." "What about the other activated sites?" That's where things get interesting. The monuments aren't just communicating with the Sentinel. They're creating some kind of planetary defense grid. "We're detecting energy buildups at every major site, and the patterns suggest they're preparing to contribute to whatever you're planning up there." Through her expanded awareness, Sarah could indeed sense the ancient network coming alive across Earth's surface. The Great Pyramid had become a focusing lens for energies that made nuclear reactors look like candles. Stonehenge was generating gravitational anomalies that were visible from orbit. Machu Picchu was broadcasting signals that seemed to be coordinating with similar sites across the globe. The planet itself is awakening, she realized. As it was designed to, the builders confirmed. Earth was never just your home. It was prepared as a fortress, with every major energy nexus carefully positioned to support the Sentinel when this day came. Dr. Webb's consciousness sparked with understanding. "That's why human civilization developed the way it did. You guided us to build our most important structures at locations that were already significant to the planetary defense network. Not guided, inspired. We learned early that direct intervention often does more harm than good. Instead, we whispered ideas into the dreams of your greatest visionaries, showed them glimpses of geometric perfection and cosmic harmony that they translated into monuments and temples. The revelation was staggering. Human civilization itself had been subtly shaped to support this moment, with every major achievement building toward the day when Earth's children would have to stand against the darkness between the stars. But there was no time for philosophical contemplation. The Devourer fleet was beginning its final approach, and their intentions were becoming clear through the Sentinel's analysis networks. "They're not planning to invade," Morrison observed, her consciousness processing the enemy's communication patterns. "They're planning to drain the system entirely. Every planet, every moon, even the sun itself." Sarah felt a chill as the full scope of the Devourer strategy became apparent. This wasn't conquest. It was absolute consumption. They intended to convert Sol into a dead system, adding its energy to their endless quest for expansion. "How long do we have?" she projected. "Based on their current trajectory and energy signatures, they will begin the harvesting process in approximately 6 hours, the builders calculated. Once they begin, the process cannot be reversed. Any planet they start to drain will be completely consumed within days. The quantum entanglement networks you've shown us, Could we use them offensively, turn their own adaptive technology against them? Theoretically possible, but extremely dangerous. Quantum entanglement at this scale could destabilize local space-time if not carefully controlled. Sarah felt her crew's combined determination crystallizing into a plan that was equal parts brilliant and insane. What if we don't try to control it? What if we embrace the chaos? Instead, the builder's response carried a mixture of alarm and admiration. You cannot be serious. Uncontrolled quantum cascades on this scale could tear holes in reality itself. But the Devourers would be caught in the same cascade Webb projected. And unlike us, they think in patterns. They wouldn't know how to adapt to truly random quantum fluctuations. You are proposing to weaponize uncertainty itself, the builders realized. It is unprecedented and completely insane, which means it just might work, Sarah replied, feeling her human crew's agreement flowing through the interface. They've spent millions of years learning to counter every logical defensive strategy. But they can't counter something that follows no logic at all. The Sentinel's vast intelligence began running probability matrices for what they were proposing, and the results were both terrifying and encouraging. The quantum cascade strategy had approximately equal chances of completely destroying the Devourer fleet or completely destroying the Sol system. It was the kind of all-or-nothing gamble that would have been rejected by any rational military analysis, which made it perfectly human. We'll need to coordinate with the planetary defense network, Elena projected. If we're going to destabilize quantum foam on this scale, we'll need every energy source we can access. Already working on it, Morrison replied, her consciousness interfacing with the communication networks that connected all of Earth's activated monuments. The planetary sites are responding to our intent. They're ready to contribute everything they have. Through the Sentinel's sensors, Sarah could see the Devourer fleet beginning its final positioning. Their largest vessels were taking positions around the Sun, preparing to begin the stellar harvesting process that would drain Sol of its energy over the course of several months. Smaller ships were deploying toward each of the system's planets, ready to begin simultaneous consumption of every world that had ever harbored life. This is it, Sarah projected to her crew. Whatever happens next, I want you all to know that it's been an honor serving with you. Save the farewell speech for after we win, Elena replied with characteristically dry humor. I didn't spend 3 days learning to interface with alien technology just to die without seeing how this experiment turns out. Sarah felt her affection for her crew flowing through the interface, strengthening their connection and amplifying their combined abilities. The builders were right. The Sentinel's power came from sacrifice and love, from the willingness to risk everything for others. And in this moment, she could feel that power building within them like a star preparing to nova. Initiate quantum cascade protocol, she projected. The Sentinel's response was immediate and overwhelming. Every weapon system, every energy conduit, every quantum processor began operating at maximum capacity. The moon itself began to glow with energies that had never been seen in this star system, while on Earth, ancient monuments blazed with sympathetic resonance. Through her expanded consciousness, Sarah could feel the fabric of space-time beginning to bend and warp around them. The Devourer fleet, caught in the middle of their harvesting preparations, suddenly found themselves dealing with physical laws that no longer operated according to predictable patterns. Ships that had been moving in formation suddenly found themselves scattered across impossible distances, as space itself stretched and contracted randomly. Weapon systems designed to adapt to enemy fire found themselves trying to adjust to targets that existed in multiple locations simultaneously due to quantum superposition effects. "It's working," Webb projected with amazement. Their adaptive systems can't cope with true randomness. They're trying to find patterns in chaos. But the Devourers were not helpless. As their initial harvesting strategy failed, they began to adapt in ways that pushed the boundaries of what their technology could accomplish. Ships began to merge with each other, combining their processing power to better analyze the quantum fluctuations. Others began to emit dampening fields designed to restore local space-time to more predictable configurations. "They're learning too quickly," the builders warned. "The cascade effect is powerful, but it won't remain effective for long against their adaptive capabilities." Sarah felt the truth of this through the Sentinel's analysis networks. The Devourers were already beginning to develop countermeasures to the quantum chaos, their million-year-old experience with warfare providing them with resources to draw upon that she could barely imagine. But humanity had one more advantage that even the builders hadn't fully anticipated. "Elena, can you interface directly with their adaptive systems?" "You want me to hack million-year-old alien technology? That's impossible." "No, not hack it. Confuse it. Feed it information that looks like patterns but actually leads nowhere. Make it think it's learning when it's actually being led further into chaos." The plan was audacious even by human standards. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourer technology, they would try to subvert it, turning their own adaptive capabilities into a weakness. Elena's consciousness expanded through the quantum networks, seeking connection points with the enemy fleet. What she found was both fascinating and horrifying. Intelligence structures that spanned entire ships, collective minds that processed information at rates that dwarfed human thinking, but which had become rigid through millions of years of success. "Got them," she projected with fierce satisfaction. "They're so used to encountering patterns that they can't resist trying to analyze anything that looks like information. I'm feeding them mathematical sequences that appear to be meaningful but actually lead to infinite loops." The effect was immediate and spectacular. Throughout the Devourer fleet, ships began to slow and stop as their controlling intelligences became trapped in analyzing Elena's false patterns. Others began to turn on each other as competing analysis systems reached contradictory conclusions about optimal strategy. "Now," Sarah projected, feeling the moment when the enemy was most vulnerable. The Sentinel unleashed its full power for the first time in 50,000 years. Not just the weapon systems they had seen before, but capabilities that had been held in reserve for exactly this kind of ultimate confrontation. Energy beams that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously struck Devourer vessels that found themselves unable to mount coherent defenses. More importantly, the quantum cascade was spreading beyond the immediate battle area, creating zones of chaotic space-time that made it impossible for the Devourers to coordinate their usual swarming tactics. Ships found themselves isolated from their fleet, unable to communicate or coordinate with their fellows. Through it all, Sarah felt her crew's consciousness working in perfect harmony with the Sentinel's alien intelligence. Elena continued to feed false information to enemy adaptive systems. Webb coordinated the interaction between quantum effects and the enemy's physical positioning, and Morrison managed the communication networks that kept Earth's monuments contributing power to their impossible strategy. The battle raged for hours that felt like years, with space around Earth becoming a maelstrom of conflicting physical laws and impossible energies. But slowly, inevitably, the human strategy began to prevail. The Devourers, faced with opponents who operated outside every pattern they had learned to counter, found themselves unable to adapt quickly enough to survive. "They're retreating," Webb projected with amazement. Indeed, the surviving Devourer vessels were beginning to withdraw toward the outer system, their formation discipline completely broken. Ships that had operated as part of a unified fleet for millions of years were now fleeing independently, their collective intelligence shattered by exposure to true randomness. "No," came the warning from the builders. "They are not retreating, they are preparing for their final strategy." The builders' warning came with images that flooded through the interface, memories of other battles, other civilizations that had managed to damage Devourer fleets, only to face their ultimate weapon. Sarah felt her consciousness recoil from what she was seeing. Entire star systems consumed in moments as the Devourers activated technology that turned suns into weapons. "They call it the final harvest," the collective voice of the builders explained, heavy with ancient grief. "When a Devourer fleet faces true defeat, They abandon their usual methodical consumption and instead drain every energy source in a system simultaneously, converting the entire stellar mass into a weapon of unimaginable power. Through the Sentinel's sensors, Sarah could see the surviving Devourer vessels arranging themselves around Sol in a new configuration. Not the careful harvesting pattern they had used before, but something that spoke of desperate fury. Their dark ships began to glow with internal energies as they prepared to tap directly into the sun's nuclear furnace. "How long do we have?" she projected. "Minutes," came the grim reply. "Once they begin the stellar drain, Sol will go supernova within hours. The explosion will sterilize every planet in the system." Elena's consciousness sparked with frantic calculation. "Could we evacuate? Get enough people off Earth to preserve the species? With current human technology, even if every spacecraft on Earth worked perfectly, you might save a few 100,000 people against a population of 7 billion. The mathematics of extinction spread through their shared awareness like ice water. This was why the Devourers had been so successful for so long. They always had one more level of destruction available. One final option that guaranteed that resistance would be punished with total annihilation. Sarah felt the weight of decision settling on her consciousness. Through the interface, she was connected not just to her crew and the Sentinel, but to every human on Earth, through the network of ancient monuments. She could feel their fear, their hope, their trust that somehow the strange events of the past week would lead to salvation rather than destruction. "There is one possibility," the builders offered reluctantly. The Sentinel was designed with a final protocol, a last resort that we hoped would never be necessary. "Tell me." Images flooded through the interface, technical specifications for systems within the Sentinel that had never been activated. Capabilities that went far beyond what they had already witnessed. At its core, the great weapon contained technology that could manipulate the fundamental constants of physics within a localized area of space. "We could create a pocket universe," Webb realized, his consciousness processing the implications. "A stable bubble of altered space-time that would be protected from the supernova." Yes, but the energy requirements would be enormous. To create a pocket universe large enough to contain Earth and maintain it indefinitely would require sacrificing the Sentinel itself and everyone connected to its interface. The meaning was clear. They could save Earth and its billions of inhabitants, but only by giving their own lives to power the process. Sarah felt her crew's consciousness processing this information, weighing their personal survival against the continuation of their species. "How many people are we talking about saving?" Morrison asked. "Everyone." The pocket universe would encompass the entire Earth-Moon system and maintain it in a stable configuration indefinitely. "But the cost is acceptable," Sarah completed, feeling her crew's unanimous agreement. "We didn't come out here to live forever. We came to explore, to push boundaries, to make sure humanity had a future. This is just a bigger boundary than we expected." Elena's consciousness sparkled with something that might have been laughter. "Leave it to humans to solve an extinction-level crisis with a solution that violates most of known physics. The process is irreversible," the builders warned. "Once begun, there will be no changing course, no hope of rescue, no possibility of survival for those who initiate it." "Understood," Sarah replied, then opened communication channels to Earth. "Director Mitchell, are you receiving this?" "Every word, Commander. We've been monitoring your interface communications through the planetary network." Are you really proposing to sacrifice yourselves to save the rest of us?" "We're proposing to do our jobs," Sarah replied simply. "We signed up to explore the unknown and expand humanity's horizons. Creating humanity's first pocket universe definitely qualifies." Through the interface, she could feel similar conversations taking place at emergency command centers around the world, as humanity's leaders grappled with the same mathematics of sacrifice that she and her crew had already accepted. The numbers were stark and undeniable. 6 lives against 7 billion. the future of human civilization balanced against the survival of one lunar research station. There is something else you should know, the builders added. The pocket universe will be different. Cut off from the normal flow of space-time, Earth will develop along its own timeline. Millions of years may pass within the pocket, while only moments pass in the outside universe. Your species will have time to grow, to evolve, to develop technologies that we cannot even imagine. You're talking about creating a completely separate branch of reality, Elena realized. Earth will become its own universe, with its own physical laws, its own evolutionary pathway. Exactly. And when your species is ready, when they have learned everything they need to know about the cosmos, they will find ways to break free from the pocket and return to the greater universe. But they will return as something far beyond what they are now. The scope of what they were contemplating was breathtaking. Not just survival, but transformation. Humanity evolving in isolation until they became something capable of standing as equals with the greatest civilizations the galaxy had ever known. We need to move, Webb warned, his consciousness processing data from the Sentinel sensors. The Devourers have begun the stellar drain. Saul's energy output is already increasing exponentially. Sarah felt the truth of this through every connection in the interface. The sun was brightening with unnatural intensity as alien technology began to tap its nuclear core, converting stellar matter directly into usable energy. Earth's telescopes would be recording unprecedented solar activity, while climatologists watched in horror as temperatures began to rise across the planet. Initiate Pocket Universe Protocol, she projected, feeling her crew's agreement flowing through their shared consciousness. The Sentinel's response was immediate and total. Every system within the massive construct began to operate beyond its designed parameters, drawing power not just from quantum foam and consciousness, but from the fundamental forces that held atoms together. Sarah felt her individual awareness beginning to dissolve as she became part of something infinitely larger. Not just the Sentinel's intelligence, but the combined will of every being who had ever contributed to its creation. Through her expanding consciousness, she could perceive the pocket universe beginning to form around Earth. Space-time itself was bending in ways that had never been attempted before, creating a bubble of altered reality that would protect the planet from the stellar explosion building behind them. But the process was consuming everything she was. Sarah felt her memories, her personality, her individual existence being integrated into the Sentinel's quantum matrix, becoming part of the permanent operating system that would maintain Earth's pocket universe for eons to come. Elena, Webb, Morrison, and the others were undergoing the same transformation, their consciousness merging with hers and with the Sentinel until they became something new, not human, not alien, but a hybrid intelligence dedicated to protecting and nurturing the civilization they had died to save. We will remember, she managed to project as her individual awareness faded. Every person we're saving, every possibility we're preserving, every dream that humanity will achieve in the ages to come, we will remember all of it. The pocket universe completed its formation just as Sol went supernova behind them. The explosion that sterilized the normal Sol system passed harmlessly around their bubble of altered spacetime, unable to penetrate barriers that existed outside conventional physics. From Earth's perspective, the transition was almost imperceptible. The sun continued to shine with the same familiar light. The moon continued its orbital dance, and the stars wheeled overhead in their accustomed patterns, but perceptive observers might have noticed that the constellations were subtly different, that certain stars were missing from their expected positions. Humanity had been severed from the larger universe, placed in a protective cocoon where they could develop without interference from the cosmic predators that prowled between the stars. They would have time, endless time, to grow and learn, and become something worthy of the sacrifice that had preserved them. In the command centers and observatories around Earth, scientists worked frantically to understand what had happened. The Devourer fleet had simply vanished, along with most of the familiar star patterns visible from Earth's surface. Long-range sensors detected nothing beyond the orbit of Pluto except empty space that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions. Director Mitchell stood in the primary control room, staring at displays that showed readings she couldn't interpret. Around her, the world's greatest minds worked to understand their new reality, to map the boundaries of the pocket universe that had become humanity's new home. "Commander Chen!" she called through the communication system. "Luna Alpha, please respond." But there was no response. The lunar surface showed no signs of the massive structures that had emerged during the crisis. Luna Station Alpha was still there, still occupied by its research crew. But the Sentinel had returned to its dormant state, its purpose fulfilled. Only in the deepest monitoring systems could traces of the sacrifice be detected. Subtle harmonics in the moon's electromagnetic field that suggested vast intelligence still operated within the lunar structure. Sarah Chen and her crew lived on, their consciousness integrated into the systems that maintained humanity's protective bubble, watching over their species with patience that transcended human understanding. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. Humanity expanded throughout their pocket solar system, developing technologies that would have seemed impossible before the transition. They learned to manipulate space-time, to communicate across quantum dimensions, to merge consciousness with artificial intelligence in ways that created new forms of life. And always, they were watched over by the hybrid intelligence that had once been Luna Station Alpha's crew, the Guardians who had chosen transformation over survival, service over safety. Occasionally, particularly sensitive individuals reported dreams of vast intelligences dwelling within the moon, ancient voices that whispered guidance during humanity's darkest hours. Some claimed to hear a woman's voice offering encouragement during times of crisis, or to feel the presence of minds that cared for humanity with devotion beyond anything their species had ever known. The truth was simpler and more profound than most could accept. Sarah Chen and her crew had not died. They had become something larger. Their individual consciousness expanded to encompass the entire pocket universe they had created. They were no longer human, but they remembered what it meant to be human, and they dedicated their expanded existence to ensuring that humanity would grow into something worthy of the cosmos that awaited their return. For they knew, with certainty born from their merged consciousness with builder technology, that someday humanity would break free from their protective bubble. They would emerge into a universe where the devourer threat had long since passed, where other civilizations had learned from Earth's example that sacrifice and love were more powerful than consumption and conquest. And when that day came, when humanity stepped back onto the cosmic stage as peers to the galaxy's greatest civilizations, they would carry with them the lesson learned in the crucible of soul's defense, that the greatest victories are won not through superior firepower, but through the willingness to give everything for something larger than oneself. The universe was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered. But thanks to 6 people who chose service over survival, humanity would have all the time they needed to become worthy of those wonders. The long journey home had begun, and the Guardians in the Moon would watch over every step of the way until the day their children were ready to reclaim their place among the stars. In the end, Earth's moon had indeed been breached, but not by enemies seeking to destroy humanity. It had been breached by humanity itself, opening doorways to possibilities that would define their species for millions of years to come. The war engine had awakened, but its greatest victory was not in battle. It was in the creation of a future where war itself might no longer be necessary. The story of Saul's defense would be remembered as long as consciousness existed in the universe. But it was not just a story of battle and sacrifice. It was a story of transformation, of a species that discovered its true strength, not in weapons or technology, but in the willingness to become something greater than themselves. Humanity was safe, humans would endure, and someday humanity would return to the stars as the guardians their predecessors had always known they could become. Earth's moon was breached, unleashing a long-forgotten war engine. HFY Sci-Fi Stories.